Shalom, I'm Rabbi Michael Panitz. I'm the Rabbi of Temple Israel of Norfolk, Virginia, and I'm speaking to you from the pulpit of our synagogue. At this time, I'd like to share with you a message entitled A Song for the Sabbath, Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbat, which is the title of the 92nd Psalm. When we think of holidays, we typically imagine the seasonal ones. Pesach, the spring holiday. Sukkot, the annual harvest, autumn celebration, and so on. The Bible reminds us, in a passage we will be reading this coming Shabbat, that we have a holiday every week. That is the Sabbath. Leviticus chapter 23, verses 2 and 3, Moadei Adonai asher tikru'u otam mikra'ei kodesh, elehem moadai, Sheshet yamim te'aseh melacha, uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat, Shabbaton, Mikra Kodesh. The appointed times of the Lord, which you are to proclaim to them, to the Israelites, as proclamations of holiness. These are they, my appointed times. For 6 days may work be done, but on the seventh day is Sabbath, Sabbath ceasing, a proclamation of holiness. In common speech, we say Sabbath and holiday. But that is redundant because Sabbath is a holiday every week, and every week extraordinary day. 6 days are ordinary time. The seventh day is extraordinary. Rabbis are expected to promote Sabbath observance. But here is a conundrum. Those who are not in worship are not hearing the message. And those who do attend certainly do not need to hear the rabbi wasting time by berating empty seats. In this world where mitzvah, which means commandment, has been reframed as spiritual practice, how shall we help endear the Sabbath to a partly secularized faith community? Because endearment rather than hectoring is surely what is needed in this social context. Already in the 19th century, the neo-Orthodox rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch began to explore the notion that the Sabbath was a necessary refresher of the spirit in an industrialized world. The greatest expression of that thought was the 1950 monograph of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel entitled The Sabbath, Its Meaning for Modern Man. Notice the oft-forgotten subtitle of the work, which I would paraphrase in our own feminist-influenced era of English, quote, Its Meaning for Moderns. Do moderns have a different set of needs than pre-moderns? The answer is yes in part, no in part. Agriculture is probably the physically hardest way to spend 6 days out of 7, at least in civilian life. The repetitive and piecemeal work of the artisan and the factory hand is also considerably more strenuous than most contemporary forms of work. The Israelite farmer or shepherd of the biblical era would not have needed a sermon to appreciate the gift of rest. In our days, work often tends to be stressful rather than physically exhausting. And so, yes, Sabbath rest will have a different nuance for moderns. For that reason, and building on the insights of Rabbi Hirsch and Rabbi Heschel, rabbis today will tell us cell phone and laptop addicts to make our Sabbath experience, quote, unplugged. But as I like to remind my listeners, using the words of the famous song from Casablanca, the fundamentals still apply. It is fundamental that we have a basic human challenge. The challenge is to live a meaningful life. Regardless of historical context or personal status, everyone needs to address that challenge. One of the key teachings of Judaism is an appreciation of time. When at the end of the flood story in Genesis chapter 8, God pledges never again to destroy the world, that divine pledge is expressed in terms of our experience of time. Quote, "Never again all the days of the earth shall sowing and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night ever cease." Genesis 8, verse 22. Judaism uses the experience of living through time to teach us how to live meaningfully. True, our religion tells us to savor the distinction between ordinary and extraordinary. In many domains, we have a promised land, a holy land, not because other lands are any less God's creation, but because humanity needs the extraordinary as well as the ordinary, and homeland connects with our sense of the extraordinary. The Promised Land is our homeland, and therefore extraordinary to us. Other peoples have their own homelands with the same feeling. The Navajo, the Diné, have that very strong sense in the Four Corners region of the American West. We Jews have certain deeds that we consider to be channels to sacredness. And when we perform those deeds, we say, Baruch atah, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, blessed are you, you who have made us holy by giving us commanded actions. But the domain of time receives special appreciation in Judaism as a domain of the holy. That is why the Sabbath is such a key institution of our religion. It teaches us to appreciate time by establishing a rhythm into our experience of living. 6 days of work, a day of rest. That rhythm elevates the soul even as it restores the body. And what about Shabbat for retirees or for those not compelled by circumstance to work in the old-fashioned sense? It is still meaningful. Shabbat teaches us that routine can be a scaffold or a straitjacket. We should prevent it from degenerating from the first into the second. We all seek to be productive, whether we are waged or not. Let our productivity, therefore, reflect the uplift of the Sabbath. It can and it ought to be a day for engaging with those dear to us, a day of appreciating the world that God has made, a day to let the Spirit reconnect with the well springs of wonder that refresh it. From sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, allow this day to expand your soul. The rabbis say that God placed unprecedented emphasis on soul in resting on the first Sabbath. Uvayom hashivi'i shavat vayinafash. Exodus 31, verse 17. And on the seventh day, God rested and magnified the soul. We can do the same. Shabbat Shalom.